How's it going, everybody? Gaurav, Bhatt and Mihir Vasavda here. You're listening to the Express Sports Podcast and welcome to Game Time. It's a very special edition of Game Time. Very happy to be joined today by Mr. Pradeep Magazine, one of the finest sports journalists in India. Over more than 4 decades, he has reported on a number of sports, especially cricket, broken huge stories, and has given the readers an understanding of these cricketing demigods. His new book, Not Just Cricket, is exactly that. It's not just about cricket. It gives us an insight into cricket journalism, the various bonds a reporter forms, but it also gives us a precious look into the shaping of modern India itself through the lens of a reporter. Pradeep, I couldn't help but notice several themes which continue to resonate even now. We will touch upon them later, but firstly, welcome to the show. And what was the most challenging bit about writing this book?
First of all, thanks Gaurav and thanks Mihir for having me here. I think there were many challenges. The first challenge was to write in itself. I mean, one is used to writing at best 1,000 words match report, to write a big book, and it was a daunting task to think that one has to do this. When I took the project, I didn't realize that it is not that easy. That was the first challenge, but it slowly took off. I think a larger challenge was how to mix these narratives, the personal life, which I thought not me as me, but someone who'd seen so many events around me which shaped our lives, generally of people's lives, and the cricket reportage of international cricket or domestic cricket, how to juxtapose them together and how to make it readable. I think that was a big challenge, and I was very doubtful whether I'll succeed to make it readable. I hope it is, and these were the two main challenges I had.
It is absolutely. It's more than readable. It's a glorious read. And I urge all our listeners to pick it up and read it in one sitting as I did. Pradeep, when did you decide upon the structure of it? Because I think that's the most beautiful part where you, like you said, you juxtapose your own experiences with how cricket was shaping up in those times. When did you decide upon the structure? And like you said, how difficult was that to pull off?
Well, I thought I will have a linear narrative because it would have been difficult for me to... A lot of people suggested that you first have some major cricketing event to begin with so that the reader gets hooked to it. Who would be interested in reading your personal life? And he may not go towards that portion at all. That's why the first chapter itself, I thought I will begin from present. The Srinagar part of the book itself for me was important. My journey from 50s, born in Srinagar, and then from that place coming out to Haryana, Yamunanagar, Panipat, then Punjab, Amritsar. I thought those portions for me were important. I thought I'll introduce them. And what helped was the Pataudi part of it, because I was doing this biography of his and I had his recordings. That project didn't take off. But here I thought that I introduced him very early in the book so that I could hook the reader. That 60s, 70s period, I see through his eyes. And that helped, I think, to make the narrative interesting for the reader. And then once it came to, say, 80s, 90s, and with all these cricket stars as characters in the book and all those eyewitness accounts, I thought it would work better that way. And that's how it happened.
Absolutely. And speaking of interactions with Pataudi, he mentions the petty squabbles and politics behind it. And you narrate the stories of Merchant versus both generations of Pataudi and even Kapil Gavaskar and the musical chairs of captaincy that was played there, Gangulys Dravid Chapel. And we would be remiss if we don't ask you about the most recent captaincy. Well, not musical chairs, but still there is a sort of a squabble brewing when Kohli has had to give up his captaincy in all forms of test cricket. Now there's a debate over whether who's going to be the next test captain. Do you see that, the more things change, the themes continue to resonate even today?
Look, Gaurav, these things are inevitable in life itself. Like, we are all competing with each other in a way. And the sportsmen are no different. They are human beings, though they play for the same team. But yet, human relationships are such that they work sometimes, they don't work sometimes. There are players in the team who are ambitious. There would be many players in the present team itself who will be thinking that I should be the captain. Why should the other man be captain? So inevitability of this is, as is evident even from Kohli and Rohit. I don't know what the truth is, whether it's true or not, but there has to be some degree of problem there if everyone is talking about it. Not that these issues are like life-threatening. It's just that somehow it affects the individual, it affects the team performance, and it will carry on. As you're saying, this will happen. This has happened in the past. This may have happened in the present, and it will most probably happen in the future as well.
So, talking about captaincy, I have so many things to talk to you about from this book, especially the way you bring the whole social significance and merge it with the cricketing scenario through the decades. But before we come to that, since we are talking about captaincy, I found a chapter very interesting on Ganguly. And since he's been this constant presence, at least in mine and Gaurav's cricketing consciousness throughout and in so many different roles. I have to ask you about him. Now, you call him a snooty, temperamental person. I think I may add, if there is liberty, very calculative as well. How is he, what were your takeaways from looking at Ganguly, the person, the player, the captain?
Well, I don't call him snooty, but I do say that that's the image of which people were used to talk when he came into the Indian team. Even now, maybe people may be saying the same thing. But my interactions with him, as the book you would have seen, were much more pleasant, and he was accessible. He was gracious. He was nice. I think if you meet him, if you interact with him, he's like that with people. I mean, whatever manipulation he may or may not be doing, maybe behind the scenes. But he is a very pleasant person to interact with. And as a captain, as we know that he wanted the team to do well, I think one of his biggest qualities as a captain was that he understood the fact that people like Tendulkar, Dravid, Kumble, Lakshman need to be respected. He didn't try to control them. He didn't try to present a picture of being that I'm the master of the team. He would listen to them. He would do what they would tell him to do. So I think that helped in a way that these cricketers, they didn't create problems for him. So that helped the team a lot.
You have this very interesting insight on just the slight situation that was brewing when Ganguly was being made the captain. Kumble being one of the senior players in the team, he was in the fray. Dravid, in a very personal conversation you had with him in the hotel room, he also said that he was willing to become the captain. He was open to the idea of it. Looking back, do you think Indian cricket would have been perhaps taken a different direction had either Kumble or Dravid become the captain at that point and not Ganguly?
I mean, I don't know what performances they would have had, maybe same performances because the team was the same. What Ganguly brought to the team was the fact that his equation relationship with Dalmia, who was the supremo of Indian cricket. Like, you know how board plays politics with players, and even in today, like this Kohli, Ganguly spat in public, and I don't know what is behind it, what is the truth. But it somehow seems to have affected Kohli and his quitting as captain from the test team itself. Ganguly was aware of the fact that he had some sort of a power over Dalmia because Dalmia belonged to Calcutta, to Bengal, and Ganguly was this huge iconic figure from that state. So Dalmia couldn't afford to annoy Ganguly because if he had annoyed Ganguly, if he had done something, in his home state, he would have become very unpopular. And being a businessman from that state, I think he thought prudent to do whatever Ganguly told him to do. And that helped the Indian team because he was the captain and he would demand things and he would ask for changes, which Dalmia used to agree all the time. He may not have done that had, say, Kumble or Dravid been the captain of the Indian team. He may have, may not have. But here, he had no choice. Like there is an incident I have in the book where in England, when Indian team is threatening to withdraw from 2003 World Cup over conflict of interest clause, and Dalmia is desperate. He wants to get in touch with Ganguly. Ganguly is refusing to pick up his phone, and then finally he goes via a journalist to convey to Ganguly that please pick up my phone. So all these things I doubt any other captain would have been able to do with Dalmia. And if he had done that, Dalmia would have struck back. But here he couldn't.
Since conflict of interest was mentioned, Ganguly and conflict of interest again is going hand in hand right now, sir.
Yeah, that's the very disappointing part of it is that Ganguly now as board president should have realized that he needs to be above board and should have avoided these things, but he doesn't seem to care, which is unfortunate.
Sir, you write that, by all accounts, the levers of power are still controlled by the Shah-Thakur duo. And this comes after an era of administrators who are industrialists and politicians such as Dalmia, Sharad Pawar, Srinivasan. Now, Ganguly, and especially following the Lodha Commission, he was supposed to usher in this new era. How disappointing is it And is it also one of those facts, one of those truths of life, like you mentioned at the top of the episode, that it seems inevitable that it's going to continue for some time, that this era of powerful administrators?
Well, it is disappointing because one thought after Justice Lodha Commission had formulated this more or less entirely new constitution for the board, in which there had this apex body of 9 people, in which there were certain independent people who could exercise their power, independent of board's voting politics. But it has never taken place, and unfortunately, because the board is being run by a powerful politician's son, I don't know why court is not taking cognizance of the fact that they are not implementing that report at all, and they are doing. If the Supreme Court had to come down on that heavily on them, at the moment they are illegally occupying this position because their mandate has run out. But it's not happening, which is sad.
So just switching gears and mentioning your love for commentary, you have commentated in international games, and by all accounts, it was a wonderful experience for you, even though certain people didn't seem to agree. But you mentioned all these great commentators like John Allard, Brian Johnston, and you also evoked that wonderful call from Ravi Chaturvedi, the Gandhi Ka Desh, Nehru Ka Desh. Why was commentary so integral for you growing up, or even when you were an active part of the game? And how do you see the commentary scene now? Because personally speaking, even the Arun Lal Maninder Singh pairing for me was very close to my heart, because growing up, I just heard that all the time. Ji haan, Arun, boliye Maninder. But what is that effect of great or even adequate commentary? What does that do with people who are watching the game?
Well, for us, it was the only way we could listen to or come to know what is happening in the matches, because we lived in an era initially when there was no television at all. You all are lucky that probably you started your lives with watching live cricket. We didn't. First international match I covered as a reporter probably may have been the first match I have seen also an international match. So that was important. That's why that initially I go into a bit of detail of commentators, because that's how the romance of cricket was kept alive in us by these radio commentators. They were larger than life figures for us. Each name, or Ravi Chaturvedi or Dilip Doshi or Anand Setalwad or Talyar Khan, even Merchant. Merchant was this special a person who, whatever he would say, we would all lap it up as that's the ultimate truth. So they were important figures. And see, for a lot of period of our time, we used to watch live cricket and listen to radio commentary, because that's how we had grown up. Now, obviously, radio commentary won't be popular, maybe because of FM radio and people who drive their cars or travel in cars listen to it. And I think the quality of commentary right now may be better than what it was. During my time when I became a radio commentator, that was sheer chance that I was covering a Ranji game and there was a trial taking place for young people who were recording their voices. I also did. And it was wonderful for me to realize later that Vijay Merchant was one of the experts who would pick up people for commentary after listening to these trials which people had given. And I was told by Jasdev Singh, who was then the director of radios, that Vijay Merchant had specially told him that you should give this boy a chance. I don't think I write this part in the book, but it was quite a moment of pride for me in a way when Jasdev told me that, look, I am giving you this chance because Merchant was very keen that you be given a chance. But then later I realized that I didn't want to go into that portion in detail, but radio commentary, I realized that there were people who probably were more there because of different reasons other than their merit as a commentator.
So it's a shame, no? I mean, radio commentary has kind of died. I mean, I don't know if died is a too strong a word, but it isn't as strong as it used to be earlier. I mean, given how much importance radio commentators and radio commentary is gaining elsewhere in the cricketing world and in the larger sporting world as well. Do you see any scope of them, of radio commentary getting some sort of a revival or anything like that?
Yeah, as long as radio commentary is in the hands of the state, in the sense that it's All India Radio which controls it, and even in India, the matches which radio commentary is broadcast, it is done by them. I don't think till then there is a possibility of the quality improving, because whatever the reasons, we know what the reasons are. Otherwise, yes, I listen these days to ABC. If a test match is being played in Australia, I listen to ABC because it's wonderful. I mean, the kind of energy they bring to commentary is like, or BBC, or no, the kind of analysis they do, which is so sadly missing here.
If we go further a little back in time, you have seen cricket grow from absolutely nothing in our country. How do you think cricket has reached this level in India where it now undisputedly has this number one tag in India? Why do you think cricket is so bigger than all sports combined in every sense, from day to day conversations to media and everything?
See, it was big even then because of radio commentary. It was big, but there were others like hockey was very popular. Growing up or working in Punjab, thousands would come to watch an inter-university match, and or I remember I covered a game Russia playing India in one of the small towns in Punjab, and there was a full house, huge crowd. Which is no longer to be seen anywhere. I think it's to do a lot with economy also. Cricket's popularity with India doing well for whatever reasons, they are just 7, 8 teams. So if you lose one match, even then you would win some, you would lose some. You will always be there in the top 7, 8, and people would think that India may not be very strong, but it still wins some matches because the competition, you could say, was limited. And then obviously television came in, the Indian economy opened up. See, the broadcasting rights brought in so much of money. Earlier, board used to give money to Doordarshan for broadcasting matches live. Now, suddenly, all of a sudden, broadcasters started giving money for buying the rights for televising Indian cricket. And it is multiplied, and we reached in IPL, you can see like how much money is being paid to the board. So that money also has helped in them in investing at the grassroots. So cricket has spread. It's massively spread across India. And the number of people who play cricket, like it's mind-boggling that India has just one cricket team the combined strength of people playing in India would be double, triple, or even more than the entire other cricket playing nations. Unfortunately, it has swamped all other sports because all the money goes into cricket, whether they are businessmen, advertisers, because they think that this is the game which people watch and they need returns. So they don't invest much in other sports.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? But cricket also has lived through or been this part of this narrative through a lot of major social incidents that have happened in India, which you also very nicely touch upon and talk about in your book, right from the Ram Temple movement to the demolition of Babri Masjid, the Mandal Commission, the Khalistani movement. Has cricket overlapped at all? Because you have travelled through the length and breadth of the country through these decades. Did cricket ever play a role in, say, the social scenario in that sense?
As an observer, you realize that like it's insular in a way, like there's so much happening around you, like Punjab terrorism, cricket is on, like people are getting killed. Cricket is on. There is this whole Mandal protest taking place and the society is divided, or this Babri Masjid time or Ram Mandir movement. When you are within the fraternity, I don't think people even talk about it. Somehow since it is like too much cut off from the realities of the country itself. I'm sure it is even now like that. Cricket is like at a different zone or level altogether. The players are like, because they're making so much money at the top, and I'm sure when they go back into their private lives, all these things must be affecting them, but it's not visible when cricket is being played.
Do you think that sort of insularity, like you said, it still exists, but it has gone down in the sense that you mentioned in the book, while there were skirmishes at the border and when there were diplomatic tension, India were touring Pakistan and they were playing there, insular to everything. But now that seems like an impossible feat. So in that sense, do you feel it is overlapping with, especially in the context of India and Pakistan, the diplomatic things dictate?
See, that's a different issue because that's where the state intervenes. It's the state which decides whether India should play Pakistan. When state wants friendship with Pakistan, it tells its cricket team, go to Pakistan and play. Dil jeet ke aao. Like 2004 tour of India to Pakistan. I remember there were a lot of cricketers who were a bit upset with the fact that why are they being burdened with being ambassadors for India's peace initiative. It puts a lot of pressure on them. And then they know when they're playing Pakistan, if they lose, they will be targeted. So that kind of a pressure, a lot of cricketers would feel that it's better not to play. But then this is not in the hands of players. Even now, India is not playing Pakistan. But tomorrow, if the Indian state decides that, okay, now we want friendship with them, you'll suddenly see the Indian board saying that, okay, we are inviting Pakistan team or we are going to Pakistan.
And when we were talking about the broadcasting and commentary of cricket earlier, and now it almost seems like there are allusions to battlefields and wars every time a country is touring another country, where the narratives and everything is heightened up to the level where it seems like it's something personal between the cricketers themselves. Was it ever the case before, or is this a new phenomena? What do you feel about that, all these?
See, it's always that when a team plays another team, it wants to win, and you always identify with whichever team is yours or your country. So you want them to win. But the level of jingoism wasn't there in earlier times. Like, fine, you lose, you feel disappointed, and you wouldn't be winning quite often also when you traveled abroad. But you felt disappointed and you carried on with your lives. But now the ecosystem is such that it's as if literally you are on the battlefield with the other nations. And I think that's the reason also why a lot of cricketers also have started behaving like that. I mean, they know that it gets traction when they say, oh, like they get angry, aggressive, and so it wasn't, no, it certainly wasn't to this level the way it is now. Like I talk in the book about Gandhi ka Desh, Nehru ka Desh, but the context was different. It was a team which had rarely won or never won. It wins for the first time, say against the West Indies. And the commentator gets emotional. I'm sure so did the listeners, so did we as kids. So but it was a different feel, not like this.
I had a couple of things to just ask you before wrapping up from my end. We are talking about how stories and narratives keep repeating themselves. I wanted to touch upon something that happened last week, which I guess would be relevant even from one of the John Wright incidents that you write about in the book from the Adelaide Test in 2003. And you were celebrating the win with them. And there was this thing about Sehwag's dismissal that John Wright was upset about. And he says something like, what the hell was he thinking the way he threw away his wicket? And we found ourselves repeating those lines last week when Rishabh Pant was playing his shots. What would John Wright would have said if he was coaching Rishabh Pant?
John Wright would have caught his collar and Rishabh Pant would have walked into the dressing room and screamed at him. John Wright was a fascinating character. Like, I think he was the right person at the right time for the Indian team. He was a stickler for discipline. He would do a lot of things which players may not like, but at the same time, he wasn't overbearing and he would take a back step when he would realize that players are getting upset. And as I write in the book also, his relationship with Ganguly itself is an interesting subject, worth a book where they would disagree, agree, yet work together.
That is also a very fascinating part. But sir, I guess impossible to pick one favorite memory, but do you have a story that has stayed with you over all these years? Anything that you still kind of sit and अभी जैसे आप कॉफी पी रहे हैं ये बात करते करते पर आपको एक कहानी जो ऐसी याद आ रही है जो कॉफी पीते पीते आप हमेशा याद करते हैं?
मेरे को जो शारजा वाली कहानी है जो किताब में मैंने लिखी है कि वो पाकिस्तान के टैक्सी ड्राइवर को हम बोल रहे हैं, आई एम टेलिंग हिम दैट लुक we have to file a report, drive faster, and there is huge crowd he has to negotiate. And he just wonders that why are we in such a great hurry? When we tell him that there is a match taking place, we have come from India, he asks us who has paid for your visit. And we tell him that it's the office who has paid for our visit here. And he can't believe it that such things happen in the world. He's struggling there to make a living. And here we are trying to boss over him saying that, oh, we have to file a match report with the money, traveling expenses paid for. So his laughter I can't forget even today. Then he laughs loudly and saying, "Acha ji, dunya mein aisa bhi hota hai." So I think that memory has stayed with me because it made me realize what privileges we have as a journalist, and we should realize that, and rather than think that, oh, we are great.
Certainly, it does put things in perspective, like you said. And speaking of journalists and especially sports journalists, I wanted to talk about the current sports journalism scene where you mention in the book that technology has made it so easy that the same person can write, edit and make pages also. Certainly, me and Mihir have had days when we've had to shoulder the three-pronged responsibility. How was, just to bring our listeners to speed, how was the technology back then? What was the process like of putting the page to bed after going out reporting for the entire day? And how have you seen it evolve? You have been involved in the online stuff as well, and you've seen print journalism grow. What is the lasting memory?
Well, when I started, there was a lot of staff for page makeup, and there were these lino operators who would lead based. You would sub the copy, edit the copy on pages. There used to be tickers. You would mark them, then send it for composing. Composing used to take a lot of time because it was done manually. It was not that you sit on computer and whatever report you have to type, you edit and made it simpler. It would take about 8 to 10 hours. Even if my copy was ready, my entire page copies were ready. Even then it had to be composed, then proofread and re-edited. operators would also make a mistake. There was a separate proofreading department for it. So that process itself would take 7-8 hours. Right now, if you can bring out a page, if you have the material ready in about half an hour, 1 hour, which was not possible then. But then the transition itself wasn't very smooth because a lot of people lost their jobs as well at that period of time. You had those operators, Leno operators and page makers. In fact, we used to live in dread of the page makers because they knew that these people are dependent on us, and especially youngsters, they would bully them almost. So that's how it is. And technology has made it easier also, but it's because one person has to do so many jobs, it has made it difficult that way. I mean, the pressure also on one individual probably has become even greater.
And lastly, I have to ask you this. We are all cricketing tragics, but you certainly went one level ahead. You were playing for college, and unfortunately injuries and different circumstances always took their toll. But you do mention facing off against Kapil Dev, both as a batsman and as a bowler. Just take us through those two aspects, and do the fingers still hurt?
Oh, no. That's a memory I want to forget because, I mean, when I saw him play in that match, you could see that there's something like you are seeing someone who's so special. The kind of energy he had, the kind of talent he had, the kind of skills he had. I mean, you knew that, like, keep away from this man. He's special. I mean, I can never forget while I bowled an off spin to him and he literally was face to face with me and hitting the ball, and I fractured my finger because I couldn't avoid the shot on my follow through, and he got me out twice in the match. We were playing on matting, and with his pace, and that time he was very fast, and on that matting wicket with his bouncers. Even while batting, I injured my finger, and while bowling also I injured my finger. He was something out of this world.
All right. On that borderline painful note, sir, we would like to thank you for joining us on the show and talking about the book and all these wonderful memories.
No, thanks, Gaurav. Thanks, Mihir, for this wonderful, enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much.
It's been great, sir. Thank you so much.
Listeners, that's 2 Indian Express legends in 2 weeks. Last week, Mihir was joined by Bharat Sundaresan, and he gave his breakdown of how the Novak Djokovic saga played out in Australia. Do check it out. Also, do check out Not Just Cricket by Pradeep Magazine. It's a wonderful read. Stay tuned to the Express Sports Podcast. Game Time comes out every Saturday. More importantly, stay safe. Adios.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.